Welcome to another episode of the Career Chronicles. Today I'm joined by Rebecca. Rebecca, how are you doing?
Great. It's a
Okay.
happy Sunday morning.
Oh, yeah, I mean, at least on your end, it looks like the kids are fairly quiet. Mine are peacefully eating apples, so
Mhm.
I'll take that as a win.
They're being fed breakfast downstairs.
So we have like a very limited time before the chaos ensues.
Yes.
So I'll try not to take up too much of your time. Um, so just before we start, a little context, right? So what should folks understand about you in order to better understand the person sitting before them?
Yeah, just a little bit about me. I am Korean American and I am originally from the East Coast. My parents came to Philadelphia in the late 80s, and I've had the fortunate blessing of being I guess, family of dragons. My dad went to Drexel, and then that's part of the decision why I ended up going to Drexel. And I've really been in the same job and career field my whole career, following Drexel. And then I've had the fortune of opportunity to go to business school at Dartmouth. And my career has really been about working with tech companies. And I am a young mom of two, so that's been part of my career journey thus far.
And I feel like I think that a lot of people like kind of gloss over that as like the almost like an addendum to your life, but I feel like more times than not, and I think nowadays we're feeling it more that this is a significant part of our of who we are and like what our life entails. So I do want to like kind of harp in on that
Mhm.
specifically. Um, but let's so you did mention that probably or big deciding factor was that your dad was a dragon himself. Do you happen to remember why he picked Drexel of all schools?
Um, Part of it is to do with Korean culture, meaning when my parents came to the US, they were used to students or their kids going to colleges nearby. So I think that was a really big factor for my parents. They really wrestled with the idea of me going to school outside of driving distance. Kind of if you think about Korea and Seoul, like, most of the kids either stay at home, and so first of all, that was like a big determinant. Is like only go to schools within driving distance, which I was okay with. And then yeah, going into Drexel, my family was so my dad came here to go to graduate school for engineering. And so I always knew how technically strong Drexel was. So
Mhm.
that was a big part of deciding to go to Drexel is because they had the very specific program for business and engineering. I was really intrigued by that. So that was really the main deciding factors. I wanted to do that. And then the co-op program was really the main reason why I decided to go there.
Yeah, of all majors, why business?
Um, I guess maybe it is a big influence of my dad, thinking back on it, because he had an engineering degree, but then he made a business out of something very technical. So he did import and export of chemicals that went into technology. So I guess you could kind of say that I've somewhat followed in the footsteps of my dad. So I was just very intrigued by the idea of applying like business to um, something very highly complex. And so that was really what attracted me to it.
Interesting. There's, I mean, okay, so there, in our culture, we have the notorious, where like the tiger parents was just essentially push their kids to get in to one of the sacha fields, right? Like
Mhm,
usa,
mhm.
kyonosa, hegesa, right, and stuff like. Was that kind of commonplace in your family? Because your dad's already an engineer, right? So like, I could
Yeah.
imagine they might push, but
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes. So my whole family is very medical. So I
Mhm.
come my except for my dad, who is kind of a little bit of a abnormality. Most of my family is in the medical field. So my mom's a nurse. All her brothers and sisters are either doctors and nurses. I knew that I couldn't do that because I am like deathly afraid of blood. Like when I see blood, I turn white as a sheet. So my mom was like, "Okay, that's not going to work out for her." Um, and I think for law it was intriguing, but I am naturally a little bit more shy. So the idea of me kind of being very using my voice and as a forefront as part of my career seemed very daunting. But I always really enjoyed knowing how things worked. So
Mhm.
like if my dad, I got exposed to a lot of consumer electronics growing up, but if my dad brought anything home, I would immediately open it up. So I knew I was like, okay, probably engineering, something related. But I think I was just always very intrigued by not only the engineering side, but like the business aspects around it. So I think that's probably how I got there. Yeah.
So, I mean, the way I see it, hear this is worst comes to worst. If corporate life wasn't for you, you could be one of the other components from building this like family empire.
Maybe, yes, maybe.
Okay, so during your your tenure at Drexel, what did you specifically major in?
I majored in business and engineering, and then I majored in operations management. So I thought, like, until I graduated, until I did recruiting my last senior year,
Mhm,
I thought I was going to be working at a manufacturing facility because that's what I
mhm,
really did for co-op. So I worked in procurement in Johnson and Johnson, and then I worked on the manufacturing floor. And I really thought that was going to be my day job, like doing Lean Six Sigma projects and trying to optimize manufacturing. I kind of, by chance, I fell into consulting, and I'm very grateful for that. But that's for most of my, most of my time at Drexel. That's what I thought I would be doing. Yeah.
and that's I met a couple that kind of made that split, like with
Hmm.
business and engineering, or well, the other person I'm aware of is I believe finance and engineering.
Hmm.
Um, it's not very common. I mean, for me, I mean, with the work that I do now, I think that is a low key, highly valuable combination.
Hmm.
But it's not something that was, especially when we were going to school, that wasn't as, at least to my knowledge, it wasn't very common. Is there a particular reason why you made that split of engineering and business?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. What I know is that the program was there, and I think it's been rebranded now as business and engineering. At the time, it was commerce and engineering. It wasn't very popular. Or well known, perhaps. My class size was pretty small for the people in the degree. Um, I think the best way I could describe it, because a lot of times when people are like, "What did you major in?" And then I tell them business and engineering, they're like, "What is that? Is that two different degrees? Is that one degree?" It is one degree. I think the best way I could describe it from an outside-in lens would be industrial engineering is probably the
Closest.
closest corollary. Yeah.
Okay. Now, wow. So you went. I mean, kudos. That's those two. I mean, like engineering is at that school is by no means a simple program to get through, and then you're stacking on business. Um, at what point did you realize that this was going to be like as you go through your career? At what point did you realize like this was going to be something that actually working for you? Like what? Like
During
in other words, like
college
you
or
decide like my
sorry.
career makes sense.
Sorry, during college or during work?
Any point. I mean, I find that college. I mean, I'm actually curious to find out what like during the college years, what was your kind of viewpoints on that, and then post college, when like at one point did you really realize that like, hey, I figured this out, maybe.
Um, During college, what I really loved was that the degree was really broad. So I would say I was not very deep in any given area. So I wasn't
Mhm,
very deep in marketing or very deep in finance, but I got a really broad education, which I really, looking back on and like during the time period I was at school, that I really enjoyed. So I got to do a flavor of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and do all these different things. So that um that I really, really valued and cherished. I think coming out of school, that in a sense, it was really helpful to help me get my footing when I came into consulting because
mhm,
I did have to pivot and do a lot of different types of things. So that broad-based education really helped me.
mhm,
But as I progressed, I the reason why I decided to go back to school is at the same time I wasn't very deep in business, in some of the technical components. So it's just something that later I decided to add on. It wasn't necessarily negative, but I think
mhm,
for kind of coming out of college and being able to do a lot of different disciplines, that
mhm.
that degree was really helpful. Yeah.
And I guess was it more of a like at one point was there a really conscious decision to say like, you know what, I rather than really deep diving into the engineering field, I think business is the way to go. Was there a pivotal point where like that light switch really went on, or is it kind of like I just want more info?
Um, the pivotal point, I fell into it a little bit, meaning I'm very fortunate. I was very lucky. So somebody that I met during my one of my co-ops during senior recruiting season was we were just trading notes on where we were interviewing, and she just kind of by chance was like, "Hey, have you heard about this career field called consulting? You- If it seems like it would be a really good fit for you, you should check it out." Like it wasn't really on my radar, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, let me go check that out." And so, I applied to Deloitte, and when I learned about it, because I guess in the first couple of years they really encourage you to learn about different industries and different problem areas.
Hmm.
It kind of, I guess, looking back, did line up with kind of how I had approached school. And so, yeah, I think it was not until later on that I realized, like, okay, this degree was really helpful. At the same time, I don't know that my how I want to apply it is being very deep in one particular area, which would have been more like operations management and
Hmm.
manufacturing. But I was like, oh, you know what? I learned a lot of very wide disciplines. I think where I want to go as a career field is actually to try to solve a lot of different types of problems with the degree that I learned. So that moment of that friend reaching out and being like, hey, you should look at these other jobs is like kind of monumental to help me get there. Yeah.
Now that a that's a that is an interesting field, and I don't know that to my memory if consulting was that high on our list of career paths back when we graduated. I feel like for our standard issue was like either you go to an engineering company and go on the engineering end,
Yep.
and then maybe like usually when I heard that split, it was like, oh, we'll go either engineering, and then we'll at least be it may be easier to fast track like manager and higher ups because you have the business background,
Mhm.
or like you go finance slash regular like finance slash business arena where it's like maybe work for a tech company or something more technical because we have engineering background. Like it's
Correct.
one of the two. You don't really
Totally.
get, or like obviously the big four would be like, hey, like maybe work for one of the divisions that handle more techy
Mhm.
stuff. And consulting for me, I think it made things interesting when I think of you, because I feel like at the time, um, obviously engineering was predominantly male,
Mhm.
right? Um, and if memory serves, we did have a decent Asian base in that
Mhm.
school, right? But
For
it
sure.
was like typical Asian male, for instance.
For sure.
In the consulting field, I know there was a decent like male female mix, but I think it was still to my memory. I feel forget me because I don't it's like forever ago, but someone did provide like stats, and it was like still predominantly male, right?
Mhm.
Like arbitrarily for some reason like 70-80% for some reason kind of rings in my head. I don't know what the mix is for like Asia, for instance. So you essentially, in my mind, you kind of picked a career track that was like not really your demographic, right? I don't know how else to put this without being like, but it could you walk me through how that was for you?
Yeah. I guess naively, I didn't notice or emphasize it as much when I was in school, but there were moments where I was the only girl in class, or yeah, the like maybe only two girls in class. It was like
Mhm.
pretty common, especially more on like the technical subjects.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, I feel like people at school were really welcoming. That's why I probably didn't notice it as much. That
Mhm.
I'm kind of the only female in the room. Um, but I think because um, the person who had tapped my shoulder happened to be another woman. She wasn't Asian, but she was another
Mhm.
female. And then when I landed at work, there were it was the balance was pretty is more well balanced.
Mhm.
Um, I think it just made me from that point on, like it did really make me understand the importance of like women reaching out to other women, because literally, like if that friend didn't tap me on the shoulder and tell me even about a career field that I didn't even know and a
Mhm.
company that I didn't even know, I would be in a very different place than where I am today. So that's kind of how I think about it is, yeah, trying to that's what I tell people who ask me that a lot during, like, work too, because still to this day, like, I would say it's still pretty male dominated. I think it is really important to figure out, like, how to, like, help others, like, kinda and pull them up, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. And for me, I mean, Big Four. Like, I think still to this day, it's in our fields, it's you make Big Four, it's like, okay, you made it, right? But for me, growing up, I think the other understanding for a lot of us was like, hey, look, you do your 3 to 5 at the Big Four, maybe 7, and then from there, if you decide that the public accounting's not for you, look, you have that under your belt, and now you could go wherever you want and make some
Mhm.
serious bank. You decided you're gonna be here for. It looks like you're going on year 16. Can you walk
Yeah.
me through how that has kind of progressed for you?
Um, how did I get here? Yeah, and I was talking to my brother who I think I don't know the statistics, but I think back back in the day, it was more common for people to stay with the company longer. But I think in today's day and age, it's very rare for people to stay at a company like, let's say, even longer than 3 to 5 years. So
Mhm.
he was like, "How are you at this place for 15 years?" Um, I think one. This is more of a personal comment. I um haven't figured out for myself exactly what I want to do if I were to not do consulting. Because I guess the thing with consulting is, and probably why I've enjoyed it, is I've had the opportunity to reinvent and figure out different problems. But if I were to go apply for a job outside, I actually really struggle with it. Like, meaning, am I gonna apply for a job for marketing? Am I gonna apply for a job for sales? Am I gonna apply for a job in operations? Like, I'm kind of like, I can do a lot of different things. And
Mhm.
when I get to the job interview, because I've gone down the path a couple times, people are like, "What do you wanna be in 5 to 10 years?" And I think they mean it genuinely, and I'm like, "I don't know, because I could be doing anything." And so,
Mhm.
I think that's a part of a personal journey. Like, I've never really felt like, oh, I really want to do this specific domain. So I think that's been part of the challenge. But inside my company, I've been really fortunate. Like, um, it is very uncomfortable for me to talk about myself, but um, kind of I as I progressed through my career, I was fortunate enough to be funded to go to business school. So that was like a big driver for me to stay. Is they funded my business school, and then I had a 2 year commitment to stay. So I went to business school, stayed for 2 years, and then that's when I started my family journey. And they've been super generous and accommodating with my family journey, meaning I've had a 6 month leave for each of my kids. My first kid, I had more of a difficult medical journey. So I think I extended it to 8 months, but they were very accommodating with that. And then they've been very helpful in reintroducing me back into my work. And so I think those things, like, of all the things, aside from the content of the work, have really helped me stay. I've also moved around a lot of different office. Like, Deloitte has very much supported me, I think, through those different life stages. And that's, why I'm kind of here still to this day. Yeah.
And that's actually kudos to that. Um, because to your point, a lot of people do that shuffle, especially in the Big Four field. Even if you do stay within the Big Four,
Hmm.
I'm sure uh, it's not a new thing to you where like industries like that tend to be very incestuous. And what I mean by that is like you might go from PwC to Deloitte to KPMG
Yeah.
to EY and then
Mhm.
back in circle and circle and circle and circle. And I do find it interesting that for me, one of the suspicions is that maybe you weren't curious enough to find out. One of the contributing factors, just may quite frankly be that you don't hate your job, right?
No, totally. Yes.
Right?
I should say that probably out loud is I don't hate my job either. I do kind of enjoy problem solving. So yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and there's after conversations with like a lot of my friends, colleagues, and stuff like that, I feel like there are either things that are spoken quietly or things that are kind of alluded to but not openly discussed depending on the level of comfort of like there are the cultural or maybe self-imposed expectations, and the work is work. And I think this is where I don't know. For me, I think that ultimately a lot of it boils down to like our upbringing. I think it plays into it of what is your role in this society? What is your role or duty in life in general? And part of it, I think, a lot of us was raised as like go to school, get a job, get really good at your job, and then figure out family. And then I think now, as we get older, our parents' generation is like sitting there like, okay, you did the school thing, you did the work thing, now where's the family? I'm like, bro,
Mhm.
I'm still trying to figure out how to pay off my debt. Like, what are you
Yeah,
talking about?
totally.
What family, right? Was that like like could you walk me through the process in which where you kind of decide, hey, like I do want to get married, I want to get family, because I know that is kind of, it seems tangential to a career, but I feel like nowadays, and my suspicion, and correct in your case, you definitely need to let me know if I'm off, but it's kind of like no, this has to fit my this in some one way or another, this has to fit my work life, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess the layer that I should add is, so I met my husband a little bit after college, and we had been dating for several years. And his career path is that he was originally going to be a professor. Like, he was a PhD student, and his desire was to yeah, basically be a professor at a university. And as he got through like year 5 or 6, I remember him saying, "I don't wanna do this anymore. I wanna do something different." And, was supportive of that, but he was one of those that pivoted out of academia and go towards, um, software engineering. And so he did one of those boot camps, and I guess for me, what that meant is, I moved from Philly to Boston because he was in school, and then he wanted, back then, it was really important to be in person. So, I guess kinda the logical jump from there is, okay, if we're gonna go towards tech, we had to move to San Francisco. So then we moved to San Francisco, after he graduated, and so there was no time, and all I mentioned all that to say there was no time and all that to think about family. I think that was, like, more on the back burner till we kind of had more general stability with
Mm-hmm.
my work and his work, and all that. And thankfully, we kinda got there, closer to our early 30s. Once we had stability, then I felt like we could open up the conversation about kids. And yeah, we kind of had kids. I don't know statistically where we would fall, but in my head, we've had kids slightly in the later side. And so it felt like there was a sense of urgency to, if we wanted multiples, especially to have like kids. And so, yeah, kind of our mid 30s was all about having kids. And so now we have two. But yeah, it's kinda, I think, like, the big driver there was, because he was in school, we kinda had to figure out, like, where he was gonna net, and then for me, like, how I was gonna pivot to being in the West Coast. Yeah.
Now, do you happen to remember what were the influencing factors of or like kind of the drivers that led you to think like, hey, like our time's running out?
Um, One, just, I think, practical biology of it. I felt like, when I was having my son, yeah, my son, I was, I guess, already considered like a, I don't know the official terminology, but a geriatric
Yep.
pregnancy. So I think just like the practical biology of it, as I was going through the process, definitely felt like it was there. Like, you know,
Hmm.
you should have it sooner
Soon.
rather than later. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I always like to ask because I think you and I tend to be, and ironically, I think more. At this point, I've done a few conversations such as this, but obviously, even like outside of this, like these types of interviews, there's like I think there's some people who just kind of like, oh, I think I'll wait for the right time.
Yeah. Hmm.
And brains like mine tend to be, I really like my reverse engineer and calculate of like,
Hmm.
hey, what does science say? What do
Hmm.
the new research like? And of course, there's always the like, oh, there are people having kids in the 40s. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
and research says like
Right.
X, Y, and Z. Like I don't want to deal with all these other things, so I like reverse count. So I'm like for me, I'm like, hey, the gestational or like the pregnancy period is this, and like baby will be born this. Usually the gap between is like 18 months. So if you do 18 months and you do another 9 months, I'm sort of like, how many kids do I want? And I start reverse engineering that.
Totally.
And then there's the other portion where like a lot of times it's like the parents of like, at first, of course, like again, our generation of parenting, well, that were our parents rather, are kind of like, hey, finish school, get your job, right? And then I think a lot of our parents' generations have like not done that mental math of like, how long would it take to stabilize your career? How long would it be until we
Mhm.
get comfortable? And of course, I think as parents get uncomfortable, they get into like, hey, we didn't have everything set up. We just figured it out. Just get the married
Right,
thing
right.
done, then have the kids, and then you'll make money. Don't worry. I'm in the back of my head. I'm thinking, I'm like,
How? What
yeah. What are you talking about, dude?
Right.
Like, I have either mountains of student debt, or like I am nowhere near close to having like any semblance of a down payment. Like, I am not raising my family a lot of us. Well, I'll be like, I'm not raising my kid in a rental. Like, I'm not. No. Like,
Right, right,
right.
right.
And well, maybe, and I think there's that last pivotal bit. I think also like extends like, I don't even know what my career looks like. Just I can barely take care of myself
Yeah,
with
totally.
this career path, and so things get delayed.
Yeah.
And I always try to figure out like where people sit on that, like which one or what in the gamut, like where's that sliding scale of like what influences what. And for you, it looks like it was just like it was a personal like, hey, like I'm just looking at this from a very practical thing. And I'm like, hey, look, if I want more than two kids, and thankfully, I'm assuming there hasn't been too many like parents nagging.
Yeah, it's there's like a lot of things that you bring up which are kind of refreshing my memory and bringing up different things, but the thing I want to say is when my dad came to the US to go to Drexel, his original ambition was to get a PhD and go back to Korea.
Hmm.
Um life numerous
Yeah.
life events happened, one of which was they had me.
Hmm.
And so he didn't actually finish his ambition of a PhD. He walked away with a master's, so he had a lot of personal regret. So Adrian actually, my husband, wanted to get married earlier because we got married closer to the end of his degree, but he was like, I think we're both committed, let's get married. But my dad said no. So because of his personal regret, like, because I was marrying somebody who was in his mind chasing the same thing that he was doing. He's like, you guys, if you get married, then you're gonna have a kid and everything's gonna get messed up. That was like his own personal regret. So in that, like, my dad actually kind of like delayed us, and maybe that worked out, you know, for the best. I think we're pretty responsible, but who knows? But yeah, I think things worked out better for kind of better. So that was one factor. And then, but then at the same time, my dad had my brother when he was 36. So he was like, oh, you should have kids earlier because, if you have it later, then like when you're going to be raising them when you're much older. And I was like, Dad, I don't
Quick
understand.
one.
Like, at one point, you're like, get married later. The same, on the other hand, you're like, have kids quicker. And I'm like, I don't know how to, like, I don't think
Compute
biology
that.
can, like, work in that time frame. But yeah, it was just funny because I felt like pressure kind of on both ends at
Hmm.
some point. Um, but yeah, I would say that one of the practical things is like, yeah, so we got married, had more stability, and then started kids. In some ways, I kind of wish we did start earlier because we had in our minds wanted a third one after having two, but I think now it's just too late for a whole host of different reasons. But yeah, I kind of I have a lot of thoughts about like timing and things I would have done differently. Yeah, if that makes sense.
This gives me like flashbacks. Like, I don't know how many times I would hear like, the aunties or the uncles, talking about their kids and whatever, and they're like, and then I know their kids, so like we always it's almost like a broken record situation of like, you can't, like, especially with the girls, like the Asian girls.
Mhm.
And obviously I out here predominantly with like the Korean community, but I do hear a lot with like, for instance, China, like all the Asians in general. It was like, you can't go out, no dating, no seeing boys, da, 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 da. And then like, why can't you get a husband? I'm like,
Literally, it's like, how do we
yeah, like, you
get
don't let me
from
go out, you don't let me go
totally,
date, and yet you expect me to just abracadabra a husband. Like, I don't,
yeah,
you don't
totally,
like, I don't understand how this works, right?
totally,
Well, back in my day, da, da, da. I'm like,
yeah,
bro, like
How did that yeah, no, totally, yes.
I don't know how to tell you this, but like life, like the world has changed, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't just walk into like a cafe and be like that one, you
Right,
know.
totally, yes.
And there's Bridget screaming at the door. uh, you know, it does make things difficult, and that was one thing I was always curious for, because there, I think a lot of us, well, now that some of like I'm assuming some of your friends were like maybe not married,
Mhm,
you might have heard like, yo, my parents are telling me to just get pregnant first and we'll figure out the rest later.
mhm.
And I'm like, you guys are, where the
Crazy.
hell were you like 10 years ago when you guys were like, knuckling down on all the strictness,
Right,
But,
totally.
I do find it interesting because we're at a stage in our life where, obviously kids, no kids. And for those who don't want to have families, God bless, right?
Mhm.
And for those who do, it's kind of like, hey, like one of my common questions, like, hey, did you wish you started sooner? Right. Or, we kind of discussed that because I'm almost curious to see like what are the driving factors in that, because obviously, look, our careers are important. For me, it's not necessarily the work that you do. It's what do you do that you feel purpose in, right? And I think that's what it is, right? Like there's, uh, I think when I see people that don't have it, they tend, more times than not, I've noticed that they're off. Like they're more miserable on a regular basis. There's
Mhm.
no joy in their life. But then, as I talked to them, it's like, hey, was it like your parents? Because like, especially in our culture, usually it's like late 20s or late, right? Like, so it's like, wait, so you want to go to college, get my degree, get married, because 20s, like maybe start a career,
Right.
get married, and then start banging out babies like late 20s, early 30s. I'm
Right.
like, in this American culture, generally speaking, I feel like it's not until like the 30s that you really kind of hit your stride in your career. And so for me, the question for you is like, how, because it looks like you did, you sacrificed, like the way I
Mhm,
perceive it, you sacrificed, like, hey, like I'll move to where my husband is going to
mhm,
be, and I move in support of where his pivots were going to be. and,
mhm,
and and this is, again, to be clear, it's not a like a woe is me, and like,
mhm,
I'm sure there was a willingness in terms of like, hey, like
mhm.
this could be another fun adventure. But how has juggling your career and that life adjust, like those pivots in life, how was that for you on a like in an internal, like self dialogue, self assessment basis?
Yeah, I think so that's where, in one sense, I've been in one company for 15 years, but I've also had to highly pivot and reinvent myself over that time because um, I feel like our company is very network driven. It's
Mhm.
very much, which I'm sure most companies are. It's very much like being connected to some kind of practice area. And so, yeah, I moved to Boston. That was kind of a net new thing.
Mhm.
And then I moved all the way to the West Coast, um, to San Francisco. Um, and that was finding a new network there. And then we moved back to New Jersey. But I think, one thing that I have done during that time is I always knew that I wanted to do um, technology in kind of consumer technology or consumer electronics. So that thread was there. What that looked like each time I've moved for those different things is I had to sacrifice something. So what I mean by that is when we moved to San Francisco, um, for a year and a half, I was flying between San Francisco and Raleigh, Durham every week, and that was really hard. Um, and so I think, yeah, kind of my mentality was I was doing a lot of these things kind of for the joint progression of our relationship and future family. Um, as I moved different locations, I tried to stay to like the theme of my career that I felt like I was going in. But I ultimately had to make some types of sacrifice in terms of either the project opportunities or my own personal kind of time to get there,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
And what specifically was hard about it?
I think because naturally, my I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think my upbringing tends to be very risk averse. So when I thinking about going to a new location where you don't know the people, like, yeah, it there was a possibility, right, that I wouldn't find a project or I wouldn't be able to click into a network. There's always, like, n number of things that could go wrong, and
Mhm.
it feels like you're leaving behind something that is relatively stable. That fear in itself was, like, a big deal to overcome for me. Um, it's something that I'm still working on, which is I wish that my parents encouraged me to be a bit more a risk taker. But I think just, like, the fear of overcoming that was, like, the biggest, like, mental hurdle, if that makes sense.
And what was the like? How'd you get through that? Because you say this, and yet you move at least twice.
Yeah.
And for me, like the reason why, like I know a lot of people gloss over that, but statistically, people don't move. I think it was something like beyond 20 miles of where they grew up, and this is like like we're talking about 80-90% of people,
Mhm.
and there's a reason for that. And I don't care how risky you think you are. There's something about uprooting in life that causes a lot of stress,
Mhm.
anxiety, and like enough to have people like, oh no, hell no, no,
Mhm.
no, and you did it at least twice.
I guess so. I guess, yeah. Yeah.
So like, what is that trigger? Like, how'd you manage to do that?
Maybe I am slightly braver than I'm giving myself credit for because I guess I could have easily said no. But, I'm not sure. I think part of it was if I think back, like if I'm thinking about when we moved to San Francisco, um, in one sense, it was like pretty practical, meaning the boot camp that my husband went to, 90% of the jobs that were available to him through that program were in San Francisco, and he landed a job out there. So in some sense, that was kind of decided through the career opportunities that he got. Um, yeah, I don't know how I got through it looking back at it. I think I just kind of sunk my teeth in and just kind of went through it. I can't there's nothing that, like, sticks out in my memory of, like, wow, that's, like, the one thing that I did that I really, like, helped me get through it. Yeah.
How certain were you that your husband was going to land the job there?
Well, yeah, so that was, like, the known is he had it before we went because I don't think we would have gone,
It was a question mark.
yeah, if it was a question mark, yeah. But, like, even with that, he had a job at a very small startup, and then within, that startup, within the first, I think, year or year and a half, went under. And then we had to, like, go through the job process again. I think just, like, part of it is maybe this is, like, very personal, is, the kinda trust in each other, like, I do feel like we have very strong trust in that, like, we can kind of very strong commitment to figure out that we would figure it out somehow, like,
Hmm.
that you and I have each other's back, so even if we're, like, in some foreign country or some place, like, where we don't have access to family and the people that know us the best, that we would figure it out. So I think that kind of got me through it. Um, because yeah, there were a lot of unknowns along the way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And what do you think contributed to that? I mean, I know it seems very mundane for loads, but for me, having that kind of trust in your spouse, which seems common sense, isn't that common, I find.
Probably a big part of it is because even though we got married much later, because I've known him for so long. Like we've been
Mhm.
dating since we were much younger. So that's probably contributed because I've had a lot of time to like get to know him. Um, but probably the biggest it's probably like a silly thing, but a maybe practical thing is so he had to ask my dad, I think 4 times to get married. And just, like, knowing that I was like, "Oh," I think in my heart, I was like, "Okay, if he can work through the barrier of my dad saying no 4 times and be that patient, then I feel like we can get through a lot of different things together." Yeah,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
No, that's interesting. I mean, full disclosure for me, and still to this day, to an extent, I was never a like you need to get married and you need to have kids. Like
Mhm.
I guess the way I assess it is marriage is not marriage is a human technology for me. It's like
Mm.
it's a thing that we've done, and so for my pragmatic brain, it's a legal and tax election,
Mhm.
right? If that makes sense.
Mhm.
And that is not to say that the relationships in the marriage don't make sense. I think that for me, that's like that is like the meat and potatoes. Um, but I do recognize that there can be something that is more than just a tax form.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
and
why I get interested.
yeah, totally. And, somebody told me this recently, which I didn't really understand and appreciate, is marriage is one of the biggest financial decisions that you'll make of your life.
Mhm.
And because I think, like we were younger and, you know, at the time I thought I was, like, marrying a student, it didn't, like in my head, I was like, "Oh, he's just marrying my student debt." So
Mhm.
it didn't really seem like that was that big of a deal, but it's more, like, pronounced, I think, when you're later stage in life, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree there.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't know. I approach it from like a marriage is a partnership, right?
Mhm.
And obviously there are nuanced differences. And if you can't see that, I'm sorry. Like maybe go visit like Bio 101. But there is ultimately for me the way I looked at it, and now that I'm older, I see it maybe too many times where you get married because oh my god, I love this person. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. And your vision or your path doesn't align. And that is not to say that you need to be like every step of the way that you have to be 1000% be like this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But like how many times have you seen relationships where like they almost kind of hold each other back, or like intentionally or not, right? But it's like one of those things like people don't really get to explore their what is it
Like,
that
full potential. I don't know.
yeah.
Sorry, that not to say that in a negative connotation, but
Mm,
maybe just things that they would have done on their own, if they weren't considering, I guess, their spouse.
correct.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I am very I recognize that I'm very grateful for my career because for my job because it's given me a lot of flexibility. Like
Mhm,
that's one thing I think about a lot is, um, you consulting is I don't wanna, downplay it, it is very hard,
it is brutal.
like, working long hours. At some points, I've considered quitting just because of the travel requirements, but at the same time, I think, again, like, one of the things I'm very grateful for is it has in our marriage, like, it's given me a lot of flexibility. So, like,
Mhm,
for if I was in a different career field, if I moved to Boston, I probably would have had to change my job, but
mhm,
because of, like, kind of the setup of it, I was able to move around a lot and be supportive. Um I recognize that that might not be there for everybody, but I do think it's really important to, be as supportive as you can be because, if not, I think one of us would have always wondered, like, "Okay, what if we didn't move to San Francisco or
mhm.
go to Boston or different things?" Yeah.
And it's interesting. We haven't spoken in a decade and a half essentially.
Mhm.
Like I haven't really there was no substantial conversation since we graduated,
Mhm.
right? But one thing that struck me even when you were enrolled in KSA was that you were kind of like the put your head down and work type,
Mhm.
right? And in the corporate world, that works well in the early stages of your career because I feel like a lot of managers in that space want the shut the hell up and do your job
Mhm.
type, right?
Mhm.
And do it well. Don't bother me. Don't give
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
agita. Don't give me grief. Just shut your mouth,
Mhm.
put your head down, get your work done. I don't. I feel like it doesn't necessarily lend itself to rising up in the ranks in corporate, especially in consulting. Like my interactions with a lot of consulting folks, some of them get wild, right? And I've seen it's a different breed. Um, how is it that? Well, first off, like how was that adjustment for you? And how do you come to terms with your personality? And in some ways, I feel like arguably kind of fits, but kind of doesn't, right? And it's a brutal space. Like for anyone who's not in that consulting arena, like there's a reason why people burn out in like vicious ways sometimes.
Yeah, agree. I think it's become more pronounced as I've gotten later in my career. I feel like up till like even manager, the thing that makes you the bar and the rubric by which you're measured is very much the quality of your work. Like literally, it's just who can bang out the best Excel model or who can make the most, eloquent, beautiful, powerful, PowerPoint presentation or make the most compelling presentation. Like that's really in that it's very like meritocracy, right? Because it's very much the output and quality of our work. I think as you get more senior and you consider like going up for partnership, it is now more political. I don't want to say political in a negative sense, but it is very much like who's in your corner, who knows you, and who knows about your brand. And so that's been harder for me just because I'm not naturally a very loud person. I think it's part of my upbringing. So, for example, um, as you kind of progress, people want you to do like um, a little bit of a roadshow about who you are. So you talk about like,
Mhm.
this is Becca, this is my brand, this is what I stand for, and like these are the clients that I work with, and like how I'm going to add value to the firm.
Mhm.
That in itself is like so
Cringy.
uncomfortable for me. Like, and like even they told me to write 2 pages about like what my brand is, and that took me like 2 months to write because even though
So
like
cringe.
like yeah, because I've been doing the same thing for like close to 15 years, but just writing down on paper uh who I am from a I don't know why. It just seems really uncomfortable. I think that I have like more to do and explore, but just it feels very uncomfortable. And then another example is I've been trying to communicate to leadership like small accomplishments and wins that we've had.
Mhm.
And I always write it like, we did this, like we
Mhm.
did this and we did this. And one of my mentors was like, okay, sit down. We're going to jump on a call. Everywhere you have we, I want you to change it to I. Like, why do you keep saying we and watering down? So yeah, that part's been really hard for me to like shed and I'm still like honestly working through it of like trying to be more like in my head, like loud about who I am and what I do. Yeah.
I feel like I can relate to an extent. Like I mean, for me, I was always known as a class clown. I think you recognize that there was always a little bit of like this tungshin, like
Mhm.
for us in Koreans it's a kortong, right? It's like
Mhm.
this fool. But growing up, I think it was the Asian way, and this is where I think we got that trope of like Asians are soft, Asians are like weak, kind of thing of like because I feel like growing up a lot of times what I would hear was Kyomson, be
Mhm.
humble,
Mhm.
right? Don't
Totally.
stir the pot,
Right.
right? And there's also like there's level of uniformity that is expected of us, right? You don't step out of the lines. You don't color outside those lines. What everyone does, we move together as a group, as a unit. There's no we. There's no I. It's us. It's a family unit, right? It's
Mhm.
because when you talk about like my dad, it's our dad. When
Mhm.
it's our house, when it's your house, it's our house.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, and I never put two and two together until someone recently, not recently, but a few years back, he's like, you know that you keep downplaying, like like you're loud, you're obnoxious, and you're like, the life of the party, great.
Mhm.
Would you ever notice that you never claim ownership of the things that you've done?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, like, no, because like, there's a team. No, shut the hell up. The team rallied around you.
Mhm.
You understand that? Like, do you push this? And yes, like, yes, they helped. And don't be the scumbag that says like they didn't help. But if you did something, you should be okay to say I did this.
Mhm.
I made this thing. Like, stop saying we. Is like we're not in Korea anymore. Stop.
Mhm.
What did you do?
Mhm.
The boss don't care about what we did. What did
Mhm.
you do?
Mhm.
I'm like, I
Mhm.
sat there, thought about that. I'm like, and for me, I think there's as loud and obnoxious as it can get. Like there's a like your fingers curl. I'm like,
Yeah. It just feels
it's so
really
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
and I think, and how is that unpacking for you? Like, how are you navigating that now?
Oh, I don't know, because that's like 30x years of like, undoing your upbringing and just I think what I've tried to do is surround myself with people who can help me through it, meaning like that example, right? Literally draft an email that I'm gonna write, and then I would vet it with someone who I feel like who is looking out for me, but also will look for those things like tone on like how I can stop suppressing myself.
Mhm.
Because if I don't have people like that, I don't I feel like it's gonna take years of therapy and, just like unwinding myself, which I'm happy to do, but it's just gonna take a lot longer to get there, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's fair. And it's I'm still working through it, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest. And as braggadocious as I want to say I am, every time I have like, there are times where like, oh, like you gotta like own it. I'm like, great. Like I drove this team, and it's not. I'm like dying inside. I'm like writhing in like discomfort. I'm like, this is, and part of it, I don't know. Like I think it depends, right? Because sometimes I do feel like there's an imposter syndrome somewhere where like, thankfully, and it's weird because like I think for instance with my mother, she was always encouraging. But growing up, there was always those parents that are like, you're not good enough. You have to
Mhm.
do better. Like, I distinctly remember I won a medal, and I brought home silver, and they're like, why didn't you get gold? Like, this,
Mm.
what is this? Like, did you not work hard enough? And I think there's always a part of me that says I didn't earn it yet,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I mean, that's I think it depends on family upbringing. Um, but speaking of a family, it is hard balancing a family and a career, and especially young children, right? And that those early stages, it's always
Mhm.
going to be tough. And you're in a industry, you're in an industry where traveling is like paramount, right? Like, I mean, I don't know too many consultants that will not travel close to like 50% of their time, right? And for a culture such as ours where like family is usually like the core unit in which we are like graded on in a way.
Mhm.
Like career is obviously one, but then like the how the family unit is like moving through this world is another, right? So how is it that you were able to manage and balance that?
Um, I guess the first thing, the career field has shifted a bit, so we don't travel quite as much. So before I had my daughter, I was planning to quit because um I just didn't imagine how I could be a present parent if I was away like 3 to 4 days of the week. So that was my plan, but then, of course, COVID-19 was a terrible pandemic, but it did change the trajectory of our career field. So I don't travel quite as much. I travel um, probably 2 weeks out of the month, and I travel to New York mostly. So it's very short. Like I'll take the train right up, and only stay there 1 or 2 nights. And in that, it's been very manageable. Um, in this season, I think the second thing is in the season, my husband and I have been, I think, kind of have an understanding that his job currently is all virtual. So when I'm traveling, he ends up being kind of the primary,
Mhm.
and then my family is nearby, so they can always help. So we've kind of figured out ways, I guess, through our own family, like ways to make it work. And then I will say the third thing is even though I'm still working on being vocal about my own accomplishments, I think an area that I have progressed, I guess, is being vocal about my needs and my
Mhm.
boundaries. So I think people have been respectful about that. So like every day, 6 to 8 o'clock, I don't work. Like I am fully dedicated to putting the kids down and bathing them. And then most weekends, unless there's like some like very urgent pressing business need, I don't really work. And so I think, that might mean that I'm not progressing the fastest necessarily in terms of
Mhm.
my career, but I have found that people are very respectful of my boundaries, and I've
Mhm.
worked really hard to be like comfortable with vocalizing what I need, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
The time blocking so that you can spend time with your family is something that I can certainly recognize because kid schedules are kid schedules, and I do feel I find that as a parent I feel, and again, and for me maybe it's a little different because I feel like part of me is unpacking childhood trauma, right? But do you find that that 6 to 8 window where you're saying, look, that's a no go for me, like
Mhm.
it's family time. Do you feel like that is out of obligation, or do you feel like it is more of a like I want this. Like I like this is like the time I cherish with my kids. Because it is, I mean, like, if you think of it one way, they're chores, right? Hey, get the kids fed, get them washed, put them in bed, let's go,
Mhm.
right? Do you find that time blocking is like almost like a obligatory, like, no, I need to be a mom and I need to be there for them, and like I have to do this because it's like it's my duty, or is it more of like a like this? I cherish this time.
A little bit of both, but I think more so on the cherish. I maybe my dad was perhaps a bit ahead of his time, but because he was an entrepreneur, he was home most of the time. And so I like really, really cherished all my time with him. So I try to make as much time as I can. And I guess long story short, I think if I had my way, I would spend more time with them. And I always feel guilty that like I could not push it up to 5 or 4. And days that it's not as busy, I do try to do that, but it's more of a, I think more of a truly like cherish, like I genuinely want to spend time with them, and I wish I could offer more of it than I currently do. Yeah.
Well, as we start to wrap up, what do you think as and does I mean obviously it could just be a generic thing, right? But if there is a unique perspective, I'm more than I'd be more than grateful for that. But as especially as an Asian woman going in a predominantly male dominated field, are there any kind of bits insight or words of wisdom that you impart in terms of the industry that you've selected?
I think number one, I think finding good people is so important. And even if there aren't a lot of women in your career field, I think trying to find ways to connect with them is very important. The other thing is keep your eye open. Like I think males can equally be some of my strongest mentors who have really pulled me up in like that email example where I said that person is vetting for me is actually a male. So I think just like really surrounding yourself with people who can help fill in some of the gaps and areas and weaknesses that you have is probably like the most important thing that I think I could say. Yeah.
And would generally for those who are now graduating
Hmm.
or recent graduates, what is the recommendation for them? And if they're like, hey, I'm thinking about getting consulting, is there like a hey, do it, don't do it, or is there anything that you would like to tell them?
No, I still think I think it's an amazing career field to get into. It gives you like a really good foundations to jump into other career fields. So highly like looking at highly recommend it. I think also the world has changed a lot because in the past it was oh, career consulting is usually like a field that you can only enter in out of college, and then it's like harder to get into later on. I think that dynamic has shifted quite a bit. So, um, we see a lot of like very focused experts come into our career field as well. So, I guess net net, like I think a great place to start. If it's not for you right now, but you might want to consider it, I think the best thing you can do is set yourself up of like kind of knowing what your very specific expertise is going to be and really focus on building that. Yeah.
It's interesting. And hopefully, the last question: if you had to go back and talk to your younger self, and you get to pick the time, um, but what is it that you would tell her?
Probably, yeah, when I was uh in my early 30s, try to have kids earlier. Because yeah, it definitely gets harder later on. Yeah, I think that's like one personal regret that we're working through now. So that's probably what I would tell her. Yeah. Like don't be afraid, you know. Yeah.
What the years of partying and traveling and the best years of your life wasn't worth?
No, it's more so like I think I just had such a big anchor to have like stability, whatever that means for different
Hmm.
people. And I don't think I don't think my bar for like what that stability looked like had to be so high as what I thought it was what it needed to be. Yeah.
That is a gem. I think. Well, but I think that is a gem that the younger generation won't realize till they're where we are.
Yeah. Totally.
Unfortunately, I think those because I think that's the same advice that I would roll my eyes at when I was like in my mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I got to think of a better way to like nail that down because I really wish I'd listened to those sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, any final parting words?
No, I thank you for the invitation to be part of this. I think yeah, I just like sometimes I'm more focused on the work and not always cognizant that I am either the women or the Asian woman in the room. And so I think it's really important to yeah, find moments like this to talk about people's stories. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Even though as uncomfortable it is for me to talk about myself, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, like like I think it's because I have that brief context with you throughout Drexel years, and granted, look, throughout you know phases of people's lives and careers, I do recognize there are very interesting ways people like evolve
Mhm.
over time. But for some reason, I could almost feel my skin crawl for you right now. Like, and this is not an easy thing. It is, especially. It's not like I warmed you up over the course of weeks and months. I was like, hey, like, dude, do you want to do an interview? And the fact that you stepped up and you just said, yeah, sure, like, just give me details and I'm down.
Mhm.
That in itself, I don't think you'll appreciate is something that is very hard. And secondly, it is something very commendable. I mean, it was very easy for you to just either ghost me
Mhm.
or just think of any possible number of excuses. It's like, yeah, I
Mhm.
can't. Like, I gotta wash my hair. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Right,
Right?
right, right,
It's
right.
so I, genuinely, truly, sincerely, I do thank you for your time.
Of
I do,
course.
I do, uh, find myself very grateful that you at least trusted me enough to like sit down and have a conversation. Because at this point, it's like it's another stranger, right? It's like
Yeah,
some dude randomly saying, "Hey, let's talk on camera."
totally.
So I do thank you for your time.
Of course.
If people want to reach out, where can they find you?
On LinkedIn, yeah, I actually am pretty good about monitoring it. That's how I know that's how we connected, but,
Yeah.
LinkedIn would be definitely the best way.
So, uh, with that said, I do thank you for your time.
Of course.
For everyone out there, if you have any questions, come reach out. Otherwise, we catch you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.